Hello and welcome to Rappler Talk. I am Mara Cepeda. Today we are joined by Albay 1st District Representative Edcel Lagman, one of the dissenters of the controversial anti-terror bill in the House of Representatives. Hello, sir. Welcome to Rappler.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to interact with you.
Okay. What makes the anti-terror bill so dangerous that critics of the government should fear it? That actually not just critics, but even people who would just, post on social media and say something against an abusive policy of the Duterte administration. How can this bill be used to stifle dissent? Maybe you can cite some of the provisions that are
Well,
quite problematic.
we can start with the redefinition of the crime of terrorism. Under the existing law, there is a political motive or purpose or acts of terrorism, and I quote, to coerce the government to give in to an unlawful demand. This is the political motive. This major element has been deleted in the proposed Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020. Why was that done? I think it's obvious. The purpose is to facilitate the apprehension, prosecution, and conviction of suspected terrorists. I would submit that there is no universal definition of terrorism as of now, but there is an international common definition, which would include the element of political purpose or motive. That is why I take exception to the statement of the speaker that the present definition is consistent with international standards. It is not, because it has removed a very major element, which I repeat is the political motive or purpose. Now,
Mhm.
what are the specific provisions in the proposed Anti-Terrorism Act which are repugnant to the Constitution and violative of human rights and civil liberties? Number one, there is the warrantless arrest, wherein a person can be detained for 24 long days without any judicial recourse, without any judicial warrant. This is 8 times longer than the present provision in the Human Security Act of only 3 days. As a matter of
Mhm.
fact, the 3 days has been institutionalized by the Constitution when it provided that even if the uh, writ of habeas corpus is suspended, a detained person should be brought to the judicial authority within 3 days. Otherwise, he should be released. These are extraordinary and extreme circumstances, and 3 days is the maximum. In ordinary times, which is being provided for under this act, it's a maximum of 24 days. Number two, there is also the authority to make surveillance and wiretapping for a maximum of 90 long days. Well, if an authority to wiretap is given because there is a probable cause, then it should not take the police officers or the law enforcers more than a couple of days to make that wiretapping and get the necessary evidence. Now, there is also the authority to pry into bank accounts and
Mm.
freeze the same for a maximum of 6 months. And prior to that, the AMLAC, without any court authority, can freeze deposits for a period of 20 days without any court order. Then there is also, by the way, the exceptions from the Anti-Wiretapping Act and the uh, law on bank secrecy are so repugnant because they are contrary to the venerable laws on this protection of privacy and bank accounts, which were enacted more than half a century ago. Now, there's also the ex parte designation of a person or a group of persons or organization as a terrorist group by the Anti-Terrorism Council, which is not even a judicial or a quasi-judicial agency. It is an executive agency wherein the members are officials adjunct to the executive. And also, there is the inclusion of very vague provisions which are open to abuse by enforcers and by the executive agencies, which could make deliberately wrongful interpretation and unlawful arrests. So there are so many others, but these are the major ones. And I suppose, Mara, there are claims by the sponsors that human rights and civil liberties are well protected under the provisions of the law. These are more lip service and nothing else. Let me go to a particular provision, which is Section 4 of House
Yes.
Bill number 6875, which provides, and I quote, terrorism as defined in this section shall not include advocacy, protest, dissent, stoppage of work, industrial or mass action, and other similar exercises of civil and political rights. If the provision ends there, then that is very good. That is uh, that is a protection of human rights and civil liberties. But the sponsors did not quote the provision in full.
The second part, the more dangerous
There
part.
is a killer provision which says, which are not intended to cause death or serious physical harm to a person, to endanger a person's life, or to create a serious risk to public safety. With this killer provision, the law enforcer, the executive agencies can just allege the contrary and ensnare innocent persons and derogate human rights and civil liberties. I think that there was some sort of maliciousness on the part of the sponsors when they did not quote in full the provision which includes this killer collateral.
Kung Edsel, you mentioned already the Anti-Terrorism Council. You know, the Human Security Act of 2007, which the anti-terror bill is seeking to amend, already has the ATC in it, and they could also order arrests without warrant. But what makes the anti-terror bill more worrisome than the HSA?
Well, you know, under that provision, the warrantless arrest would only be for 3 days. And that would even be consistent with the Constitution, which provides that when the writ of habeas corpus is suspended, uh, the period would be a maximum of 3 days. That is more than what the revised penal code would provide. Because under the revised penal code, the period is only 12 hours for light penalties, 18 hours for corrective penalties, and 36 hours as a maximum for afflictive or capital penalties. 36 hours would translate to 1.5 days only. Under this proposed Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020, the ATA has been given more uh, powers, tremendous powers, which would really derogate on human rights and civil liberties.
Manang Edsel, could someone file a facial challenge the minute President Duterte signs the bill into law?
Yes, definitely. Because once this becomes a law, the challenge can be based on infringement of constitutional guarantees like uh, due process and the rule of law, and
Mm-hmm.
with respect to warrantless arrest of excessive duration. And this facial challenge would be akin to the facial challenge on violation uh, of free speech, which has been accorded recognition by the High Court. No less than former Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Antonio Carpes, said very clearly that a facial challenge could immediately be made even before the ink dries on the president's signature on this measure.
Would you then consider challenging the anti-terror bill before the Supreme Court if it becomes a law? I mean, it wouldn't be the first time for you to bring your opposition to the bill all the way to the High Court. You have done that in the past.
I have done this before, and my past experiences on the martial law cases and the petition to deny the burial of the late President Marcos in the libingan ng mga bayani did not prosper. But that should not be uh, an impediment from trying again. And I hope that this time the Supreme Court would really look very keenly on a very blatant, repugnant violation of constitutional guarantees.
So you are considering filing a Supreme Court case against the
Yes,
bill.
definitely. But before that, there could be measures which can be done in order to prevent the bill from becoming a law. That is why yesterday I wrote Speaker Cayetano to hold in abeyance his signing the enrolled bill so that momentarily no enrolled bill would be sent to Malacanang, and if there is no enrolled bill uh, transmitted to Malacanang, then the president has no bill to approve or act upon. And there are precedents here. You will recall, uh, Mara, that uh, with respect to the General Appropriations Bill of 2019, uh, Senate President Tito Soto refused to sign the enrolled bill, alleging that the House of Representatives inserted provisions after the bicameral conference committee report had been approved jointly by the House and the Senate. So that is a very clear precedent that a presiding officer of the House or of the Senate can refuse to sign an enrolled bill. But there is even more uh, important, there's even a more important precedent, and that is with respect to the abolition of the road board. In this case, the House already uh, approved on third and final reading a bill abolishing the road board. It has transmitted to the Senate that bill, and the Senate has previously approved their own version. But still, the House, by action of the membership, recalled the transmittal of the bill. Consequently, I am suggesting that the House has the authority to rescind a bill approved on third and final reading. Why did I write the speaker about this? Because this would give the speaker the opportunity to consult with the members of the House on what actions or mode of addressing the concerns about the constitutionality of this measure and the infringement of human rights and civil liberties. Because we should consider the following facts. The House, when it voted on these measures, sizable members of the House voted no, and also some, many more, voted abstain from voting. And what is important, there were those who voted yes with strong reservations. This would
Mhm.
all be indicative that this bill does not have the full support of the House, and most probably there is a reason to review uh, the passage of this bill. Number two, there is now the uh, escalating protests nationwide and multi-sectoral against this measure for being repugnant to the Constitution and violative of, fundamental freedoms. And also,
Right.
we should also consider that the House just copied verbatim the version of the Senate, which includes all of these repugnant and unconstitutional provisions, instead of making its own uh, draft of the measure and approving the same in plenary. So that
Ako.
should give the House the opportunity to do its work consistent with the bills filed by various members of the House, and also to give every member the opportunity to present perfecting amendments during the plenary consideration of the measure. But
So,
finally,
mhm.
I would like to underscore, Mara, that no less than Representative Rupi Biason, the first listed principal author of the measure, and one of the leading sponsors of the bill, voted no and withdrew his authorship of the bill. So all of this considered, I think there should be an opportunity given to the House leadership to really review what has happened in this nation.
But in the first place, Kong Edsel, who led the charge behind the scenes for the swift passage of the anti-terror bill? And how did it happen that there was no amendment whatsoever? I do know that there were hearings even before the pandemic hit the Philippines. Anong nangyari? Why? Who ordered na suddenly you're just going to adopt the Senate version? Do you see
Well,
anyone responsible for this?
Mara, I am an independent position. I am not privy to the behind the scene maneuvers in the House. But the unfolding of events and circumstances would show the following. One, after President Duterte certified to the immediate enactment of the measure, the House leadership must have instructed the joint committees of national defense and public safety to fast track the approval of a committee report wherein the joint committees would just adopt verbatim the Senate version in order to preclude a bicameral conference committee. And the further instruction of the leadership was for the sponsoring committees not to accept any amendment so that there will be no differing provisions between the House version and the Senate version, and there would be no need to form a bicameral conference committee. So I think the House leadership should be answerable to all of these maneuvers. But principally, it was because the president certified this as urgent. Well, according to uh, uh, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, a former colleague, uh, the certification does not mean that there will be an automatic approval of the bill into
But do
law
you believe it?
and that there will be a review. a review on the constitutional issues. Well, that is welcome, but that is an admission, Mara, that there was a culpable negligence on the part of Malacanang, on the part of the Office of the President, in not reviewing first the constitutional issues and to find out whether there are violations of the Constitution with respect to this nation.
Going back really quickly to the speaker, has he responded to your letter?
No, I was expecting that he would, if not directly by writing me back his reply or during his statement earlier
His
on the
speech.
closing the
Mm.
speech on the before we adjourned Senate, but he did not mention anything about that except the fact that according to him, let us read the law, and the law let us read the bill, and the bill provides for sufficient safeguards. We have read the bill 1,000 times, and these are no safeguards at all. They are all lip service. And the most important thing to consider is the killer provision, which I mentioned earlier.
Manong Edsel, winding down to my last few questions for today. What do you think will be the implications of the anti-terror bill backlash on the House? You already mentioned that a lot of your colleagues do not, even those who voted yes, they voted yes with reservations, so they are not wholeheartedly believing in this bill. Do you see any switch of political alliances in the House, for example, given how strongly constituents are airing their anger to the representatives? Do you see that happening?
Well, at the moment, I do not see that of changes in alliances. But I can foresee a strong uh, campaign on the part of even the legislators for the House leadership to review this bill and most probably take the necessary action wherein the enrolled bill is not signed and sent to the office of the president, and then there can be a reconsideration of the approval of this measure because so many of us really think that there is a need to have a more righteous and protective uh, law, even as we fight terrorism, as we should. But we should not do that at the expense of human rights and civil liberties.
Filipinos in different parts of the country are already taking their opposition to the bill to the streets. Do you observe, a greater opposition to this particular bill compared to other controversial and more abusive laws that have been passed under Duterte, or is this anger just online fury that will not amount to anything?
Well, I think of all of those questionable bills and policies initiated and implemented by the present administration, this proposed anti-terrorism act of 2020 would really serve as the much needed uh, guidance or object for a nationwide protest. And I hope this protest would really be considered very well by the executive and by the legislative departments, including I'm calling for not only for the House but also for the Senate to reconsider this measure. Remember, this came from the Senate. In the Senate, in a way, was the principal by inducement, and the House was the principal by indispensable cooperation. But both the House and the Senate are principals by direct participation.
Kung Edsel, for my last question for today, what is your message to all the protesters out there who, are expressing their anger, their frustration over the anti-terror bill? Why is dissent important?
Well, first, I would like to thank all of those participating in this nationwide protest for standing on the rights and upholding the rule of law and due process. I'm asking them to intensify their campaign against this measure and also to observe peaceful assembly and peaceful protests so that the government will have no reason to uh, uh, perform or implement drastic actions against them.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kong Edsel, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mara, for this opportunity again.
And there you have it. We just spoke to Albay Representative Edcel Lagman, one of those who opposed what he called the draconian anti-terrorism bill. Once again, this is Rappler Talk. I am Mara Cepeda. Join us again next time.